And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Thank you for joining us on the Alaska Weather Show and the marine portion of your broadcast. I'm meteorologist Emily Niebuhr. Let's take a look at satellite across the state for your Friday. You can see we have one low pressure system pushing in across Bristol Bay into central Alaska. We have some lingering thunderstorms from last night that are still slowly dissipating near Arctic Village, and another system coming into the western portions of the Bering. These systems will all be impacting our visibility across the state over the next few days. Again, the red denotes IFR conditions, which means instrument flight rules and lower visibilities and lower ceilings for pilots. So as you can see, Saturday morning, widespread IFR conditions along the coastal regions with some even MVFR across Anchorage, across Kodiak, and into some of these more typically interior locations for Saturday morning. Elsewhere, outside of any thunderstorm development, we're expecting generally good visibilities and ceilings across central portions of the state. Saturday afternoon, we might get a few thunderstorms popping up in the interior locations, especially along the mountains. So even though we're expecting better visibility locally, it could be a little more challenging and keep up to date with the latest weather so you can fly safely. Saturday afternoon, a lot of that low stress and clouds will start to mix up a little bit along the coast, so we'll improve to MVFR conditions. But just off the coast, we are looking at IFR conditions. Same story in the Gulf of Alaska, widespread IFR conditions. Meanwhile, in the Panhandle, we do have a high pressure system, which will generally be causing VFR or pretty good visibilities for that region on Saturday afternoon. By Sunday morning, however, that system moves into portions of the Panhandle, so you are going to be seeing generally a decrease in visibilities by Sunday morning. Same story as the systems are starting to move into the Bering, widespread IFR conditions, and again across areas such as Nome, lower IFR, lower visibilities in much of Bristol Bay, and MVFR conditions along the Alaska range, and possibly lower visibilities with some leftover thunderstorms in the morning. Sunday afternoon, we're really not expecting as much widespread thunderstorm development, but we could have some lower clouds developing along the Alaska range in the afternoon. We're also, the visibilities will be mixing out some improvement along the coast, but as soon as you fly off into the Bering Sea, expect lower visibilities, lower ceilings. And similar stories, the system starts to push into the Panhandle, generally MVFR conditions in the Panhandle. Let's take a look at your pass conditions. We'll start out with Anaktuvik Pass, generally VFR conditions for your Saturday. Same story for Adigan Pass, maybe a stray thunderstorm or two along the mountains, but generally VFR conditions. Lake Clark, with that system moving inland, we're going to start out with IFR conditions and improving towards MVFR conditions in the afternoon. Rainy Pass, again, is going to be impacted by that front on Saturday, so expect MVFR conditions. Same story at Windy, MVFR conditions, maybe a thunderstorm in the afternoon, but generally lower visibilities. Isabel Pass, however, is far enough east to expect some VFR conditions for your Saturday. Same story with Mentasta Pass, generally MVFR conditions. Tahina Pass is going to generally have more MVFR conditions. Same story for Portage, with actually IFR conditions in the morning in the eastern portions of that pass, where there might be some stratus influenced by Prince William Sound. Meanwhile, Chilkoot and White Passes will be VFR conditions generally on Saturday with high pressure in place. Let's take a look at your freezing levels. Again, we have a cooler area associated with that low pressure system moving in towards Bristol Bay. We do have a little warmer area associated with that ridge far to the south at about 12,000 feet. And generally across the interior, we are looking around close to 10,000 feet for much of Alaska. Our icing across the state is going to be related to two systems. We have one system moving in that there might be areas of considerable moderate in western portions of the Bering Sea as that system pushes in, but again, generally above 12,000 feet. Meanwhile, as you go towards Seward Peninsula and portions of the Chukchi as that low pressure system and its associated front travel across the area on Saturday, we could have portions could be considerable moderate, but generally isolated moderate icing, again, above 12,000 feet generally. Let's take a look at your jet stream. We do have a wide arc of a jet stream associated with those systems that are pushing through. So we have about 80 knots across the West Bering, 70 knots from the northwest across portions of Bristol Bay, and 80 knots from the south across much of the central interior all the way down to the Kenai Peninsula. We have some winds associated with that Saturday. So we go lower in the atmosphere. As expected, those winds are diminishing. We still have about 40 knots at 9,000 feet across western Bering, about 30 knots across the Bristol Bay areas in Alaska Peninsula, 35 knots across the northern interior. Finally, at 3,000 feet, again, we're sitting at about 4,000 feet, 40 knots along the western and central Bering, 35 knots off of Kodiak in the Alaska Peninsula. Finally, let's look at your turbulence risk. We have mainly one area of concern, and that's off on the western Aleutians. We could see considerable moderate to isolated moderate, again, near the western Aleutians at service to 4,000 feet.